Hey, psst, hey, listen, don't raise your voice. Don't look around. Don't look behind you. But I think there's somebody in the room with us, a special guest. It's October 9th, and it's time for episode 36 of the MacNN podcast.
Did we even stock the green room for guests?
Welcome back, MacNNers. Always a pleasure to have you with us.
Is the place even clean from the last time?
It's not even a green room. That's the worst part.
Yeah, you and I both know that's just tradition. I mean, it's a green room, usually not green and with old furniture and peeling paint.
Yes. But I will assure you that you and all other future guests on the MacNN podcast, that all the brown M&Ms have been removed.
Okay.
Not many people are going to get that, but the ones who do.
Yeah, the ones who do, you get a good chuckle out of it this Monday.
Joining me this week, as usual, is managing editor Mike.
Hello from the palatial second story of the MacNN building in Northern Virginia.
The commune. And joining us a little later on in the show, very excited to have a special guest. 36 episodes in, we finally have a special guest. And he's pretty special, I have to tell you. Kevin LaRue, who is with Macphun, a company that makes fantastic extensions and apps to help your photographs just do things that you just never in the world thought they would do. It's really kind of like magic tricks. No kidding. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But first, I want to talk a little bit about gaffes. Not the ones I'm making.
You have no idea how many pre-takes we had to do with the intro. It was terrible.
Really? It's me and Joe Biden making the gaffes. But no, we're not talking about us. We're talking about people coming out, talking trash on Apple, and then having to walk it back. Now, sometimes it's just an attack of conscience, I think. But, you know, Danny Boyle, the director of the new Steve Jobs movie, said something recently that a lot of people poo-pooed. Oh, you're just talking out of your hat there. But he did actually touch on a nerve, or at least I think he did. He was talking about how Apple terrifies him a little bit, not because he has an adversarial relationship with them. I mean, frankly, this movie wouldn't have been done without Apple products, but because companies like Apple and Google and Facebook have more power than any companies have ever had in the history of business, really. Well, at least since, the beginning of the 20th century, when the oil companies and the coal producers and certain business magnates like that, you know, the Rockefellers back in the day.
The whole thing with Danny Boyle, it's not up to the artists to keep track of Apple because, frankly, the artists drink from the Apple teat.
Well,
right?
This is what he was saying, is that despite this, they shouldn't be afraid to criticize.
Well, MacNN is enthusiast press.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's not press. We don't hammer the Kool-Aid quite as heavily as other places do. And we write an awful lot of editorials and do a lot of research and do a lot of work saying, hey, you know, they kind of screwed up here.
Yeah.
It is up to independent press to keep an eye on the big corporations because mainstream media is so deep in the pockets of the big companies and don't want to say anything to offend the big companies in a lot of cases that how far can you trust them?
Yeah, the relationship can get complex.
We are independent and it's costing us. I am proud to say that we get 1 million uniques a month. I am proud to say that.
And we love every single one of you.
We do. I mean, most of you are ad blocking us.
Well, except for that one guy. You know the one.
Well, we all have the one, but no, in all seriousness, our readers and our commenters are way more civil than most of the internet. I stumbled across a thread. Oh God, I can't remember where it was today, but they were talking about the battery life situation on the Samsung versus TSMC chips.
Right.
And it was just lol, Android is so much superior. It was just this ridiculous. Someone took 10 seconds out of their day to poorly type this message. And I don't get it. You're even though it's a nom de plume, your name is on this message. Your IP address is on this message. And when you run for president, it's going to come find you.
We've had, up here in Canada, we've had quite a bit of trouble with that. Social media messages left sometimes decades ago by candidates have caused them to drop out of the race. No kidding.
I just paused for a second there thinking about things on a Mac forum that I said 15 or 16 years ago that while they weren't rude or they weren't disrespectful or anything like that, they could not be construed as politically correct. They were blunt, as I typically am.
A Navy guy blunt? What?
I know. I'm shocked, right?
I'm a highly decorated veteran of the Mac versus Windows wars, so I'm sure there's no chance of me ever holding public office.
But in any event, back to the Danny Boyle thing, he said that artists need to hold these big companies accountable, and they do, but it's only part of the issue.
Yeah.
As long as Apple and Google are putting phones in award show bags, you got to wonder what the agenda of the artist actually is. Like I said, it is up to independent press to keep these guys on their toes. It's up to independent press.
At the same time, he was reacting in a way to Tim Cook's remark about how all these films about Steve Jobs are opportunistic.
Well, they are, but I don't have a problem with that.
There is, and I don't think Apple really takes too much account of this because everybody's so close to the story over there, understandably. But at the same time, fascinating people make for really great movies. And it's not just because we want to make a buck. It's because very often there's a story there that people feel didn't get disseminated to the wider public. And in this age of illiteracy that we're living in, movies are an excellent... I certainly found out more about Ray Charles from that film that came out about him because I haven't read any biographies of Ray Charles. I know who he is. I've enjoyed his music, but I didn't really know anything about his personal life until that movie came out. So visual media in particular does have, I think Boyle's right in that they have a responsibility to speak truth to power like other outlets, as you just pointed out. But yes, it's all a bit compromised and complex and not always so, pardon the genre styling, but black and white.
Refresh me. Sony didn't end up with the film, did they? Who ended up with the film?
Universal.
Universal, thank you. I can completely understand why Sony might have wanted to punt on this.
Yeah. But now, speaking of people who have said things that raised a little controversy, we'll stick with the film for the moment and talk about Aaron Sorkin for a moment. Or Aaron Sorted, as one of my friends called him yesterday. You don't want to antagonize writers too much because they are very good at coming up with insults. When Tim Cook said that these movies, and he was speaking of all of the Jobs movies collectively, I've seen that interview that he gave on the Colbert Show, and it was very obvious that he was not specifically speaking of the Steve Jobs movie. But I think certainly Aaron Sorkin, and to a lesser extent the rest of Hollywood, thinks that is the Steve Jobs movie. The only one that matters, anyway.
The Sorkin one? Yeah, I tend to agree.
And so I think he took it much more personally than perhaps he should have, and he lashed out with some very, very cutting remarks, like, people who employ children in China to build smartphones shouldn't talk to other people about being opportunistic, essentially. He walked that back the next day. He apologized. But I love that nobody knows how to apologize anymore. Nobody knows how to apologize, or at least no people in the media.
You don't need to apologize on the internet. You just don't.
Yeah, well, he did, but he sort of said, I'm sorry you were offended.
Yeah, that's not an apology. I mean,
not, I went a little far, but instead he was like, well, you didn't see the movie, so you sort of had it coming. But I went too far. I'm sorry. He had to repeat this story because Conan O'Brien asked him about it on the Conan O'Brien show. And so it was interesting that when he mentioned what he said in return, half the crowd booed, half applauded. So it was Android versus Apple people live in the studio right there. He went on to make a joke about it and to sort of try and explain that, yes, I went too far and I hope it's okay with everybody because there's a whole building full of people at Apple now who know how to hack into my computer. And I just thought, you're just digging the hole deeper there. Just stop.
Well, Sorkin himself is not without controversy. I mean, the man himself, the guy has invited trouble from the get-go. I mean, there are stories from him from the American President. There are stories from him from the West Wing. There are stories about him and how he treats people and what he says to people for 20 years. This is not out of character. It is a little bit of a glass house. It is opportunistic, but what in mass media isn't? Hey, let's make a show about nerds. The Big Bang Theory. It's been on for what, 57 years at this point? I don't know.
Well, one could easily argue that, Apple sees an opportunity and takes advantage of it. That's being opportunistic. I mean, smartphones suck. Let's make one that doesn't.
Capitalism is opportunistic.
Well, indeed.
That's the bottom line.
The other person who has recently stepped in it and then had to try and step out of it is Elon Musk.
Yes, that went down Friday.
Now, this is very much a repeat of the Sorkin thing, in which what he said may or may not have been on point, but was grossly inaccurate, to put it mildly. What he was talking about, for those of you who didn't see the story, is that he was asked about how the company is coping with the fact that Apple has been poaching some of their people.
Yeah.
And his response was, they weren't important. They're the people that we fired or couldn't make the cut.
That is such an enormous steaming load of crap.
What a load. One of the people who got poached was a lead engineer. So come on, Elon, please. Yes. To be fair, and this is the part he conveniently glossed over, Tesla has been poaching people from Apple. We've covered a couple of high-level departures of people from Apple to Tesla. So this is going on back and forth. But he, as people do, I guess, when the spotlight is on them, they say too much. They go too far. And so he went on to say the iPad Pro is a joke and the Apple Watch is a toy and some other remarks along those lines.
Musk is another guy with verbal diarrhea. I think he likes hearing himself talk.
The interesting thing is, and apparently this is what you do now, write this down, you say something stupid in person, you apologize on Twitter, where it's written down. And probably written by somebody else.
My personal favorite is you say something stupid in person, and then you say somewhere on the internet, you say, well, I was taken out of context.
Yes.
That's my personal favorite.
So anyway, Musk sort of walked it all back, most of it. He, or tried to. He's not very good at that. So he was like, no, Apple's a great company full of great people.
But yeah, you could hear the psh, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. And then he went on to say, Johnny Ive, who he knows, I don't know if they're buddies anymore, but they were.
They used to be. Maybe not today.
But he said Johnny and his team have designed a beautiful, the Apple Watch is a beautiful design. It's just not compelling yet. That'll make Johnny feel much better. Nice job.
I think Johnny's taken his money, and I think he's got a Scrooge McDuck pile of money in his really white apartment.
Yeah. Very minimalist.
Yeah.
Probably not even furnished. But
yeah.
So again, in trying to apologize, he just steps in it deeper. Now, I have to give some credit to Apple here. They're playing it savvy. First of all, they haven't said a word about this since either one of these incidents blew up. They're just like, we'll just sit back and make some popcorn and watch you. And sure enough, these guys have both had to sort of apologize and walk it back. But they remind me of somebody who is like going to take 2 weeks off and go think about the perfect insult. And come back and mention it ever so casually in another way. Tim Cook will be on an interview somewhere and he'll say, well, we sell about the same number of Apple Watches in 5 minutes as Elon Musk has sold cars. Ever.
Yeah.
Something like that. And it's true. I looked it up. I can't tell you the total number of cars because they ship some of them to China and there's more than one model and all that. But of the Model S, which is their flagship car, they haven't yet sold 60,000 of them. They hit 50,000 last year, but they haven't quite sold 60,000 yet. Probably pretty close. 60,000 Apple anything takes a week tops, right? Not 7 years, Elon. Sure, the price is high, but I think we have some experience with high prices on the Apple side too. But Apple's playing it cool and not saying anything, and that's probably the best thing to say. I think that the opportunistic line from Cook, which sort of started some of this, was probably not quite the right word, but he was making a larger point that is kind of true. And to be fair, both Sorkin and Musk have said some things that aren't completely wrong.
Play the music, because while we're on the subject of this, I got something to say about Apple not telling people things.
One more thing, and then I'll play the music.
All right.
Here's the thing that fascinates me about this. I have not seen the Steve Jobs movie. I will see it when I get down to the States. Maybe earlier if it opens here. But the thing that fascinates me about it is critical reviews have been really, really, really strong. I watched one scene of it today, which was released by Universal, the scene between Seth Rogen, who, sorry, Seth, I don't care for very much, and Michael Fassbender, who I've seen in a couple of things and like, but I wouldn't call myself a huge fan. And it was a good scene. It was Seth Rogen as Wozniak and Fassbender as Jobs, having a discussion about what it is Jobs does. There's a line of it in the trailer, but this was the whole scene. And the scene was good. It really did put you in that pocket. And all the people who, when Fassbender was announced, said, he looks nothing like Jobs.
Acting.
Zing, you missed the point.
Yeah, who cares?
So I think this movie could be very, very good. And certainly the reviews have been super strong. And yet there's also been some testimonials from people who worked with Jobs in the very early days saying, yeah, this captures him pretty well. Wozniak, who worked on the film, and Andy Hertzfeld primarily. But these people go back to before 1984. The people who worked with him later, what I'm going to call the next crew that largely came over with Jobs when he returned to Apple, Tim Cook and Eddie Q and some of these other guys, they seem to feel like all of these movies are unnecessarily negative. And as Sorkin said himself, I totally understand their desire to protect and nurture the legacy and the memory of their friend. But who's actually getting this story right? It's difficult to say. And the reason it's difficult to say is because...
It's because he's dead.
No, it's not.
It is.
It's because you are different people at different points of your life. Simple as that, really. There's a story going around that Lorene Powell Jobs, Steve's widow, tried to stop the film from being made. Well,
that's not quite the story.
Yeah, that's a gross distortion of what actually happened as far as we've been able to work out. She was concerned about it and didn't want to participate, and that's her right. And that seems to be more or less the limit of it. If you call that trying to stop the movie, very ineffective, I would say. And, she's not a powerless lady.
Not only are you different people throughout the course of your life, but you're also different things to other people.
Oh, yes.
I think how you're going to view the movie is going to depend on how you like the Sorkin style of dialogue.
Which I tend to like.
Which you get in The West Wing and The Newsroom.
And The Social Network.
In The Social Network, right? And I think how much you were aware of what was going on with Apple in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s, I think will also color your perspective on the movie.
Yeah. The one thing that you should not be under any sort of impression of, and this has been true, I think, of most of the Jobs movies, and even Pirates of Silicon Valley for that matter, is they are highly summarized and very artistically licensed sort of cliff notes of what actually happened, at best.
And we play the music. I've got something grinding my gears.
Okay. Welcome to another episode of Grinding My Gear.
Yeah, not even. And this isn't even old guys complaining about the way things used to be. That's not even that either.
This is Mike Worthley's own personal podcast. Go.
About a month ago, Apple started removing things from purchase history. It happened on the Mac App Store for about a day, and they fixed it.
By the way, we're talking about when you buy something from the Mac App Store or the iTunes App Store or any of Apple's other stores. In theory, you're supposed to be able to re-download it on demand forever.
Well, yes, but we'll get into that in a minute. I'm going to make this quick because we do have guests. So this has been happening on the iOS App Store for about a month.
Yeah.
And Apple has not completely restored the purchase history, but it is almost complete.
I wanted to let you know, by the way, that I checked mine today and Bioshock is there again. Okay. It was gone for a while, but it's back.
There are a couple of associated issues with iOS development, which I am only going to lightly touch on because we were going to get more developers on the show and they're going to talk about it, how they see it from their perspective. Mm-hmm. Apple is not the resistance anymore. Apple cannot keep their mouth shut when there's a problem and expect that that's going to be okay.
Yeah.
There was a problem with app history downloads. They should have said, yeah, it's a bug. Settle down, everybody. But instead, we spoke with 4 people inside the company and we got 2 different answers.
And this is not just like the guy who answers the phone.
No, this is not just the guy that answers the phone. This is a gentleman that I've known for 18 years and he's high up at this point.
Yeah, and we worked our way up the executive chain and up the marketing chain to see if we could get answers.
He's not giving the information on the supply chain or anything like that, but he'll periodically, give me what they see is going on. And he straight up said the other day, yeah, things are different now and this is what we're doing. And maybe we didn't tell the public and the developers well enough. And then he put me in touch with somebody else the next day when purchase history seemed to be getting restored. Again, after about 5 weeks of this, not one day on the Mac App Store. One day I can buy it's an inadvertent bug. 5 weeks? Not so certain about that.
Yeah.
So we got a different story from him, and the 2 of them had a chat while I was on the phone and said, okay, well, we have to hang up now, is what they told me.
The ghost of Steve Jobs has appeared. We got to go.
But the thing is with tens of millions of devices sold in a quarter, I still think that they need to do a better job promulgating when there's a problem. If for nothing else, from a security problem or something like this where they're going to fix it, or the problems with iTunes, which they still were running around like chickens with their heads cut off for a long time until it got fixed 4 versions later.
Yeah. Even if they're not sure whether they're going to fix it or not, they could just say we're investigating. The thing I have consistently found throughout my life is that if you're upfront with people about a problem, they are just way more forgiving than they should be.
And all of these things they should have been upfront with.
Yeah.
They should have said before El Capitan shipped, look, your drivers are going to break. They are going to break.
Yeah, especially if you have a FireWire device with a driver, forget it.
FireWire audio is completely gone.
Busted.
It is gone. It doesn't even exist. You can't make it work.
Yep.
So don't even bother. This is something that Apple knew before the betas came out, and this is something they should have promulgated a long time ago.
Yeah.
PCI RAID cards are breaking. SCSI initiators are breaking. The entire audio production industry is in a shambles right now because so many things broke.
Yeah.
You had mentioned something about developers being the problem, but I couldn't figure out a good way to say that I completely and utterly disagree with you on that point. I think
sometimes lazy developers who knew that this was coming and didn't fix it in time are the issue. But I'm not trying to put the blame entirely on developers.
What developers have told me is that 99 bottles of beer song on the wall it doesn't decrement with software bugs. 99 bugs on the wall, you take one down, you pass it around, 137 bugs on the wall. I don't think it's lazy developers. I think that's the case. In something like this, where so many things were going to break, it should not have been up to, well, people like us to get flaming data on it.
Right.
And this is a problem, I think, with Apple's new status being the only PC manufacturer that is increasing in market share every month, being the only mobile manufacturer that is increasing in share every month in the United States.
And being the only manufacturer who is responsible for the whole widget, so to speak.
Yeah, I think they need to do a better job of saying, look, this is for the greater good. We're breaking some stuff. I'm sorry. Here's what you can do to fix it, if you can even fix it.
At the Worldwide Developers Conference, they do this to some extent. But the problem is, first of all, some developers don't really pay attention. But the second problem is that it doesn't get out to people who need a few months' notice that their FireWire-based audio device is no longer going to work and nothing can be done.
Or the driver situation, because they've locked down directories in Unix.
Yeah. I remember a few Mac OS versions ago, printer drivers for those huge, gigantic, large format printers that have ink-fed systems going into them. Broke. It was the company needed to write new drivers, but they fired those programmers years ago. They no longer had any staff for that because the drivers would work for so long, and so they were just hanging. These were print shops all across the United States suddenly no longer offering their bread and butter money-making service.
Yeah.
One other thing about restoring purchase history, I just want to mention this and we'll move on. I first encountered this actually in iTunes, of all places, and this was many years ago. I like music by Van Morrison. I don't have every album he's ever owned or anything, but I like a lot of his songs. So when the iTunes store first started up, when you could first buy songs on the internet, that's what I bought, was a bunch of Van Morrison songs that I really liked. And 6 months later, I had a hard drive failure. This was a long time ago, and so I didn't have the complete set of backups I do today. And I needed to re-download these songs. And I went, no problem. I can re-download them.
Owned. You couldn't.
Only I couldn't. In the meantime, Van Morrison had decided he didn't want to sell on the iTunes store, and he pulled his catalog. And so those files were no longer available for download. Later, they all came back, and that's all great.
Jordan is dealing with something like that right now.
Yeah, but you didn't know, and you didn't know it was going to come back. So, yeah, it was a rude awakening, let's put it that way. As I pointed out in the article, as you pointed out in the article, and as we had to point out again in the comments, there is an easy workaround for that problem, and that is back up your purchases.
That's not even a workaround. That's a mitigation. I mean, if you didn't have it backed up, oh, so sad. You can't get somebody else's IPA and sign it for your device.
No.
If you didn't have it and Apple decides, hey, screw you guys. If that's what Apple decides one day, then...
Or if the company decides they're not making enough money with it, or we talked about this with games not too long ago. You wrote a brilliant editorial about the peril of always on, always connected games. This is that problem all over again.
Developers can say, make this no longer available. And Apple say, okay.
Yeah.
So if it's something that you love and something you like, then you better have a backup of it. And the whole issue with older devices, I hate that. I hate how Apple handles that. Some of the applications, when you try to install it through iTunes, will say, oh, well, wait, there's an older version of this that works on this device. This one doesn't. But not all of them do that.
No, it's very inconsistent because it's left to the developer. Apple doesn't make that standard.
Some things need to change.
Yes.
Because I don't think in iOS 10 that the iPad 2 and iPad mini are going to keep going. I think we're going to lose a lot of devices on the next version of the iOS. Very
likely, yeah. I mean, there's already certain, and this has been an accepted practice for quite some time. This is nothing new. But certain features that are available to the iPhone 6S are not available to the iPhone 5S.
Sure, yeah.
That sort of thing. But at some point, it becomes impractical. And so they just drop support. So local backups just as important as any cloud or whatever backup, because I don't want to say these big companies can't be trusted, but there's a combination of factors that could end up coming to bite you. Let's put it that way. Next up, a special guest. This one happens to be from a company I absolutely adore. Their stuff is incredible. We talked about them a little bit last week, but I want to explore that in more depth. And who better to talk to than Kevin LaRue for Macphun? How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Charles. Thanks for having me on board.
It's a pleasure not to talk to somebody named Mike for a change. Oh, he's going to hate that.
Oh, yeah.
You better cut that. The first thing I want to ask you about is you guys have been making some really great products for a while now, and I have been a big fan of them as they've come out. For the people who are not familiar, can you tell us a little bit about Macphun's products and what you're best known for?
Macphun got started back in 2008. By 2011, we were on the Mac App Store with a series of, I would say, consumer-level imaging products, things like FX Photo Studio and Color Strokes and of course, Snap Heal. Fast forward a few years, and I think the apps that we're most well-known for at this point is Intensify, Tonality, Snap Heal, our venerable flagship product, and also Noiseless. That's one of our new products, which helps anyone shooting in low light conditions, or say with a smartphone or an action cam. It helps them remove that digital noise that sometimes occurs when you're shooting, when you're having to crank the ISO up.
One of the things I love about it is, Noiseless in particular, is that it doesn't soften the picture too much. I don't know how you do it, but most other noise solutions really soften the picture, and of course they get rid of the noise by doing that, but now everything's blurry. I recently just had to shoot some pictures of that blood red supermoon eclipse end of the world thing that was happening.
Fantastic.
And without Noiseless, those pictures would be terrible.
It's gratifying to hear because I know that they've worked pretty hard at maintaining or preserving those edge details. And I think, a lot of the technology from our Intensify product kind of flowed into Noiseless from that perspective.
You have sort of two levels of your applications, versions that are sold through the Mac App Store, and then pro versions that you sell directly. Can you explain a little about what the difference is?
So the Mac App Store versions, we call those kind of our standard versions, and they're very powerful in their own right. But in 2013, we really saw the need for software as plugins. Mm-hmm. So it kind of speaks to a class of software that runs within a host application, like, say, Photoshop or Lightroom or even Aperture.
Right, real pro applications that are mostly used by people who are making a living with that stuff.
Yeah, you have a lot more people that are producing just unbelievable work. We see them all the time on our Facebook sites posting images. In a sense, we're sort of appealing to the entire photographic hobby, to prosumer to pro photographer user base.
Yeah. Now, the pro versions are standalone programs that can also be used as plugins in Photoshop and Lightroom. And Aperture, is that right?
Oh, yeah. We'll even support Photoshop Elements.
I've been using the pro ones for a while now. I started off using the regular ones and then I upgraded. And, of course, it's made Photoshop so much more fun to use because a lot of the presets that you include with some of these programs need very little tweaking to make them my own. And then I can save them as my personal presets.
Yeah, you're saving custom presets out of there. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And recently in some of the pro apps, you've added masking, where I can paint just an area to lighten or reduce the noise or whatever. To me, that's made a big difference. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I recently wrote a blog post at macphun.com, and I used what was called a gradient mask. And so I created a layer. We have our own layering system in Intensify and Tonality. I made a gradient mask to give the foreground of the image just a completely different and slightly artistic look versus the background of the image. And I think it really came out pretty well, and it's super easy to do. And so you hit upon one of those features that, you don't hit upon maybe the first time you run the program, but as soon as you know it's there, it can become indispensable.
I give a lot of demos to user groups, and sometimes we'll feature these programs. And the one that always gets the most oohs and ahs is Snap Heal. I got to tell you right up front.
Okay, yeah, great.
One of the reasons for this is because, particularly here in very scenic Victoria, British Columbia, we've got stunning views all over town and power lines in them.
Ah, yes.
The glorious Olympic Mountains and a power line. And if it's not a power line, it's a seagull that just happens to be flying by at that moment. So being able to take that stuff out or being able to remove the tourists off the Inner Harbor Walkway. It never fails to be a literal Mac magic trick.
Oh, yeah. Those are, one of the fun tricks you can do if you want to, get jiggy with it, if you will.
All right. You get out of the 90s pool already.
There you go. You can kind of do these levitation tricks. And we had somebody standing on a box. And of course, the intent later on is to take it into Snap Heel and remove the box. And it can really look cool.
You know who's really great for that kind of shot are ballet dancers who know how to stand on their toes, right? So I have been thinking for some time, that would be fun to take a picture like a woman holding an umbrella, that's being lifted up towards the sea, and you just Snap Heel away the little stool that she's standing on. First, I got to get a ballerina to talk to me, and then...
Nice one.
But yeah, that one is certainly a crowd favorite. But on another occasion, I demonstrated tonality, and these were mostly people who were into photography on either an amateur or starting to become professional level. And even they did not really understand until we could demonstrate it in tonality how much difference, say, a red filter, which you would do on a camera traditionally, but you can do in post thanks to tonality, makes on what is emphasized in a photo, for example, or a blue filter or a green filter. It's just amazing the range of black and white. Most people think of black and white as simply being the absence of color, but in fact, there's a whole universe of looks. Oh,
that's a great point. I mean, I think a lot of people, the color filters are sort of this unsung hero of that product. Mm-hmm. But, you hit upon a great point that we like to, when we're sitting down to design software, there's this whole concept of discovery and exploration and experimentation that permeates our products, no matter which one you start with. And in the case of tonality, we spent a lot of time with professional photographers and, of course, our internal team developing those presets. And those presets, now just think of them as a starting point, but man, they can get your mind going in different directions and very quickly, too.
I took a picture the last time I was in New York City. I took a picture of an old Italian neighborhood deli, and I was intending to just pop the color in, say, Intensify or something, but I happened to use that photo and saying, let's throw this into tonality and see what it would look like in black and white. I actually realized that nothing had changed in that neighborhood in the last 100 years, and slapping a sepia or just tweaking like an old aged look on it, it was almost indistinguishable from a photo that would have been taken 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great use case right there.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about the Macphun apps is that there's a lot of filter apps, particularly in the iOS markets, and some of them are really great and they're very enjoyable. But you guys have gone like way beyond that. To borrow a phrase from Emerald, you've kicked it up a notch with layers and masks and what I would call less novelty filters and more serious filters, let's put it that way. And the fact that I can tweak them and make them my own, save them and reuse that is tremendous.
I don't know if you do this or not, but I still like to print my photos. A lot of times when I'm coming away from a session, I'll want the same look across all photos. And so, making one of those custom presets with my own unique style, boy, you just save them off as JPEGs, upload them to an online printing service, and you're off to the frame shop that afternoon. Your personal project done in a couple hours.
We look forward to your letters on asking us what printing out a photo is like. Those kids today with their Pinterest and their Facebook. So we've been talking a little bit about your standard apps, which are standalone apps sold through the Mac Store at very low prices. And those are great for people who've got a particular program they want to use, like Intensify. They can buy it, they can use it, and they don't have to connect it to anything in particular. It's a standalone program. So it can be used with just a group of images, not just like iPhoto or Photos or Aperture or Lightroom.
Right, absolutely. And in fact, one of the new features in Intensify that has just been added is batch processing.
Oh, nice.
So you talk about running a few images with a custom preset. Batch processing is now possible in 4 of our 6 apps.
Oh, that's great. Then there's the professional versions that we talked about, which are also standalone apps. They're sold directly by Macphun, and they are also plugins that work with Photoshop Elements, Lightroom, and Aperture.
Right.
So now you've just recently done something which I think is tremendously exciting with the standard apps. Tell us a little about your apps and photos.
Well, photos and editing extensions specifically within photos is something that we've been waiting for some time. As developers, we knew that they were coming and they couldn't come fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
When we knew that the El Capitan release was happening on the 30th, thanks to that clever little email during the keynote in September, we had already had development projects underway to convert our software into photo editing extensions.
I can't believe that's the way Apple told people.
So we kicked it up a notch and really, put the final polish on our editing extensions because we really wanted to be out day one. Mm-hmm. We had the extensions in App Store review within a couple of days of the keynote, and then they were held for release on the day El Capitan was released.
That's fantastic. Now, just to clarify this a little bit, what we're talking about here is when you open up Photos and you want to edit a photo, you select the photo and then press the edit button and you go into Photos' own little editing lab where you can do all kinds of adjustments. But there is one button that's just like 3 dots, an ellipsis, and you press that and that gives you more. And once these extensions start coming out, and of course Macphun is, I think, first to the game, that will list those apps that are available as extensions, such as Snap Heal, such as Intensify, such as Noiseless. Mm-hmm. And then you can open that, and that within Photos just opens the photo again, so to speak. You have all the controls of that app that you can run on it, and when you save it, it saves right back to Photos.
I was pleasantly surprised at how seamless the experience is. I mean, It's a very natural flow. In the past, we've all used plugins probably in Photoshop and Lightroom and even Aperture, and they feel like these appendages, right?
Yeah.
As I like to say, you kind of got to walk to the other side of the room to use them. I mean, Photos they really, really did a good job making a seamless experience from an editing standpoint. Once you've got them installed, you're a click away from, real powerhouse kind of features.
Yeah. And this just adds a whole nother dimension to Photos. Now, we should say, for those people listening who tried Photos out when it first came out, a lot has been done since then. We're on version 1.2 now in El Capitan, and there's quite a few things that have been added and tweaked and sort of rearranged a bit. And so Photos is really coming along nicely. Here at MacNN, we often make the analogy that what Apple will do is periodically they will take a program that you really like and treat it like kitchen contractors. They'll come in, tear everything down, then disappear for 2 weeks, and then come back. And eventually they will build you a spectacular new kitchen. But there was a bit of hell that you had to go through there for a bit. And Photos until recently was in that little bit of awkward space where it didn't do everything iPhoto did. And it certainly didn't do much of what Aperture did. So people were just like, it's not working out. But I really think that thanks to extensions and some of the improvements that Apple has made, like adding back in geotagging, that Photos I think it's ready for prime time now.
I would agree with that. And believe me, after the dry spell that we had with Aperture development, it's great to see Apple kind of committed to the platform. And I think, part of it, of course, is driven by a desire to link up their mobile Photos app, the iCloud, and the desktop together. And so there's a, strong motivation from that side as far as I can tell. And everybody benefits, right?
I think a lot of particularly Aperture users were quite frustrated because on the hardware side, Apple has done just frankly astonishing work with cameras. And they've been doing this for decades now. I had a Quick Take camera back in the 90s, and that was amazing. And then QuickTime VR came along, and that was amazing. And they have continually, there's some hardware people at Apple that just do the most remarkable stuff. What you can get out of a smartphone these days is not just solely due to Apple, but is in large part the reason why the iPhone and not some other smartphone has become the number one most common camera used, period.
That's a great insight. It's always funny to me when the new models come out, how the teardown guys will always kind of dissect the camera and, why didn't they do this or that? Yeah. Apple's behind the curve. And yet, as you say, the quality, the breadth of features, and I think the joy that people get from using the camera, the ease of use and the results, it just supersedes everything else. I don't mean to be too much of a fanboy here, but I love the cameras on the phones.
Yeah, and I'm very excited. I haven't got the 6S yet, but I'm going to. And what I've been seeing from my friends who do and the quality of the pictures they're getting are even better than I expected before. And, I knew it was going to be incrementally improved. The resolution is higher and so on. But it's the post-processing that Apple does that really just startles me every time. And what's funny is I now have two groups of friends who use their phones to take pictures of their food, and then friends who use their phones to take panoramas of everything they do.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Now the new iPhones can shoot 4K video. Look out.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And they also have that new feature, that live picture feature, right?
Or as some people like to call it, the Harry Potter effect.
Right.
Because in the newspaper for the Wizards, the photos were always still moving.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's great.
I love it when that happens. It's sort of like the first time you realized that your phone could be a tricorder. Oh, I'm living in Star Trek. This is great. Yeah, I think this is the best thing to happen to photos so far. I mean, Apple's made some beautiful improvements too, but this really takes it into whole new territory. And while I don't think it can quite match aperture yet, these extensions super help. Right?
Obviously, I'm a little biased, but as an amateur photographer, they make photos a viable alternative and a much easier to use alternative than say some of the other tools out there.
The last thing I want to touch base with you about is that in addition to selling these products individually, either on the Mac App Store or directly from Macphun, you also have a kit, a sort of bundle. Can you tell us a little bit about the Creative Kit?
Thanks for asking that question, because about a week after we're recording this, we'll be releasing something that we call the Creative Kit 2016. It's a bundle of 6 of our most popular apps, great price, some great training that comes along with it, and we're pretty excited because for the first time we've taken all of our most popular applications and put them into a single installer with a single key. And so that may sound like it's a housekeeping issue. Mm-hmm. But man, from a convenience standpoint, it's so great to just install everything at once that you need from Macphun and be able to do so quickly and conveniently. The other thing we worked on, Charles, with the Creative Kit 2016 is the ability for the apps to move files very seamlessly between each other.
Oh, I see.
So let's say you've got a smartphone photo that's got something you need to remove, and it's shot in low light. So sure enough, you just bring it into Noiseless, clean it up, move it straight into Snap Heal with one click, take away the unwanted object, and then you can move it to tonality or you can move it to intensify for the final polish. And so it's a different editing experience than maybe the monolithic Photoshop model that a lot of people have. It's using purpose-built tools, and you're just seamlessly moving, you're very quickly moving the file between them until you get the result that you like. I think people are going to really like it. It's a kind of a different model, but it's very easy to understand, very easy to use, and I think I'm excited to see what people do with it. So that's the Creative Kit 2016. We've obviously got specials running on it right now from a pre-order standpoint.
Oh, nice.
You can go to macphun.com/creativekit.
Now, these are the pro versions.
These are the pro versions, yeah. Each one of the apps that come in the Creative Kit are pro versions, which means they work as plugins. They can run as a standalone. Again, have that capability to move files very easily between them. It's a very powerful suite of tools. And as I mentioned earlier, there's an emphasis on creativity, discovery, exploration. And I think people will be astonished at how much they can do with their photos and how quickly and easily with the Creative Kit.
Now, we've been focused on what I'm going to call the flagship Macphun apps, but there are a few smaller ones that I also really like Snap Select. Without going into all of them, is there a particular favorite standard app that you like, that you find yourself using a lot more than you thought you would?
Well, I love Snap Select. I'm glad you brought that up. I tend to use Focus a lot because I take pictures of my kids. I like to kind of direct grandma's eye toward her granddaughter. But Snap Select is one of these applications that you don't really think about until you need it. Mm-hmm. And I find myself using it after coming away from almost every photo session. What Snap Select does is it looks at your photo catalog and sorts them automatically into groups of similar and duplicate images. And so what you can do is compare say, a group of 5 or 6 images that look fairly similar and pick just the best one out of that 5. So think about how fast you can trim 150 images down to just a more manageable 20 or 30 if you have this capability. It's really built for speed. And honestly, the single-minded goal of Snap Select is to help you pick the best image out of any given session. You know, you'll take a group of, maybe you do a little burst mode, or you take 5 or 6 pictures of group pictures. There's always going to be people with their eyes closed, they're blinking, or, you know, somebody's looking away. Snap Select lets you find the one where everybody looks great really, really quickly. And then, of course, you can take those, what we call top picks, and then move them into the other Macphun apps.
Nice. Now, there are trials available from the Macphun site for the pro versions of the apps. The standard apps are sold on the Mac App Store. And if you just decide that you need it all, there's Creative Kit.
Exactly right. Yeah. And you definitely want to try them on your own images to just, you know, satisfy your mind that the software is going to be valuable to you and you're going to love the results.
The Macphun apps will just astonish you with what you can do with photographs that you already thought were pretty good. So you should definitely give them a try. You mentioned focus. It's a good one we didn't talk enough about because it's really very nice. It really lets you redirect where the eye should go within a photo. I very much like that. Snap Heal, Tonality, Noiseless, and Intensify all now support Apple's photos. Even more of a reason to get into photos before iPhoto runs out.
And when you do migrate, Macphun's there to help you out.
So it's Macphun with a PH, MACPHUN. It's hard to remember that unless you're looking at it, but that's why we spell it out on the bike. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us, and please let all the guys at Macphun know that sincerely, we love using the products on our photos. It makes us look good.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks. I really appreciate your time tonight. I've enjoyed the conversation. I hope we can talk again.
Let us know the next time you got something big coming down the pike, and we will have you back.
Oh, it'll be sooner than you think.
Ooh, I'm excited now. Thanks a lot, Kevin, and good night.
Good night, sir.
Next up, apparently I'm living in the future. I said that last week, and I am, it turns out. There was an announcement from the executive in charge of Apple Pay that Apple Pay is now coming to Starbucks. Now, some of you are going, wait, what? I thought isn't that years ago? And sort of yes, sort of no. What was happening is that Starbucks has an app that you could reload using Apple Pay. And the app shows a little code, and they've got a code scanner at the terminal, and so they can scan that code that's appearing on your phone, sort of like current C system if they ever get that off the ground. But anyway, the scanner reads the barcode and your coffee is paid for. Great. But what she's talking about is now you'll be able to pay for Starbucks purchases directly using Apple Pay. You don't even have to have the Starbucks app or the card or anything. You just go in, show your watch to the terminal or your phone, boop, it's done. Now, I have to tell you, I've been doing this for months because here in Canada, everybody has a contactless terminal.
Yeah.
And all contactless terminals, at least as far as I've been able to tell, support Apple Pay, whether they know it or not. It just sort of works, as to coin a phrase. I pay for stuff with my US-based card on my watch all the time. And it is tremendously quick for me and tremendously entertaining for the staff, most of whom have never seen somebody actually do this before. So they're all like, wait.
Oh, cool, man.
Did you just pay for that with your watch? It is. It's pretty cool, I have to say. But the other big news is that Apple Pay is going to start being able to add, but needs more support from stores for this, loyalty cards, rewards cards, the sort of thing you take out at the grocery store, the drugstore, or Starbucks. X number of coffees gets you a free one or what have you. When you pay with Apple Pay, as long as that card is in your virtual wallet, it'll all be handled and that purchase will be credited towards your next free coffee or whatever. I don't know how many people will know this chain, but there's a chain called Fat Burger that make a delicious hamburger. And every 10 you buy, you get a free one and an appointment with a cardiologist.
I was about to say, they have to do with your medical bills.
Well, I eat there once a week for lunch because I really, really enjoy their hamburger. So about every 2 months, boom, free burger. But it's ridiculous that I have to pull out this little stupid card, which I have to keep in my wallet every time I go there. It's insane. This is exactly the sort of thing phones and watches should be doing, and I cannot wait till the day that I can do it. Mike, presuming you had an iPhone 6 or better and could use Apple Pay, what would be the loyalty card that you'd need to add?
I'm not really down with the loyalty cards, believe it or not. Supermarkets kind of make it a big deal. This is on sale if you've got a loyalty card so we can track you.
It's true. People don't, I don't think, understand how much information you're giving the merchant about yourself with those loyalty cards. But to be fair, at least you're being compensated for it.
In all likelihood, it would probably be grocery stores because most of the time I can have a screaming child in my arms saying, don't you have something you can scan and just give me the damn discount? That usually works pretty well, as opposed to rummaging through my wallet for their card.
There was a time many years ago where if this technology had existed then, it would have been Radio Shack.
Oh, yeah, your free battery.
Yeah, got to get my free battery. When I was living in Orlando, we had a place called Skycraft Surplus who never had a loyalty program, but oh my gosh, place. That would have been the place.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Here's, every 10 purchases, here's a free thing. We're not even sure what it does.
Let me just pull it out of this barrel. When you were there, did they still have the barrel of the free crap? Take a handful of free crap? Yeah, love that.
Just add it to that nuclear device you're trying to build.
I hadn't thought about the place in 20 years.
I'm going to do a podcast from there, I swear.
You have to. You totally have to.
Have to go in there. First, you have to build the microphone. Then. Yeah. Last up, I always like to try and end, before we get to our app of the week, which is always fun, the last topic that we talk about, I always like to make it something light, so that we can go out on kind of a high note. And this week, it's Harry Potter books. What? What year is it? Oh, Apple's gotten an exclusive new edition of Harry Potter books with some original text and with some new illustrations and some animations, things that you just couldn't put in print books, into the ebook editions that are available in the iBookstore and no place else. So Harry Potter fans, you need to point your wand in the direction of Apple. It looks like these books are going to actually be quite interesting. New illustrations, new animations, but in particular, some annotations written by J.K. Rowling herself.
I'm just going to editorialize on this just for a second. I know you're shocked. I have something to say. I love that she taught a generation how to read books. I love that. That is fantastic. My nieces and nephews read them all. They learned about midnight releases. They just an amazing experience to watch them grow up with the Harry Potter universe.
Yeah.
However,
here it comes.
Yeah. Reading sci-fi and fantasy from basically when I could read, in the very early 70s. I cannot hang with that universe. I can't. It's like the worst fan fiction ever. I just can't. I can't.
Well, in particular, the Harry Potter books borrow heavily, for those of you who grew up with some British literature in your lives, the Harry Potter books borrow heavily from lots of different places, and you can really tell some of the things that affected J.K. as she was growing up.
Yeah.
And that's nice. There's nothing wrong with that. But just a lovely little tribute or just a little character quirk or something like that that's clearly influenced by some other work.
And you know what? I'm fine with that because I'm a Star Trek fan and I'm a Star Wars fan, and neither Star Wars is the hero's journey. Star Trek is famously Wagon Train to the Stars. I mean,
one of the things about the Harry Potter series is that it starts off as hero's journey, turns into quest, comes back to hero's journey in the end. What's funny to me is that my wife is a much bigger fan of the Harry Potter series than I was. Not that I disliked it. I thought it was charming and fine, but she was very big on it. And every time we would go to one of the films, I would come out and I would say, well, this is how I felt about it as a movie, because I hadn't read the book. Some of those movies were very poorly put together, I thought. Did not hang together very well at all. And then sort of around the fifth one or so, they started, oh, here's how we compress this into 2 hours. Got it. Okay.
Well, clearly also her skill as an author evolved as the books went through. I would not plow through the first 3 books. Under no circumstances. I tried. My wife wanted me to read them. I tried. My nieces and nephews said, you have to read this. I tried. And I'm apologizing now. I just couldn't do it. And I am so sorry. I'm still sorry about it. But
what's funny is the first one I was forced to read aloud, right? Like a bedtime story to some younger folks. And so I had to do the voices, and this before the movie came out. So I had to do all the voices. And I ended up doing Hagrid just dead on, just by sheer coincidence.
That's good. I love The Prisoner. I love Space 1999, Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who. That's what the Apollo program.
Speed Racer?
No, that was worse. Star Blazers.
Land of the Lost?
Oh, Land of the Lost with the Sleestaks. Yeah. Gotta have those guys.
Common ground.
Dino Girl and
Electra Woman.
Thank you. With Deidre Hall.
Oh, man. Those were fantastic.
So, I've got my own weird little things that people can go, oh, to. And like I said, I love what Harry Potter has done to the youth of America. Thank you for that, but can't.
Well, the thing is, I mean, these are ebooks. They're $10 each, so you'll need $70 to get the whole set. But
it's still cheaper than going to the bookstore.
It is much cheaper than buying them from the bookstore. But not only that, say what you like about this, but we had a few commenters going, "Oh my God, she hasn't made enough money," and other
Star Wars.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but in the print world, this is nothing new. I don't even want to tell you how many editions of Lord of the Rings have come out.
Oh, geez.
That aren't any different from each other. They have a new cover. That's it. They're in the bookstores now versus in the 70s. Those are the differences. So Stephen King, most notoriously, released a few of his books, and then they went back, when they were big hits, they went back and restored 1,000 pages that had been cut.
Ouch.
You think I'm exaggerating. I am not.
I know you're not.
There's the Stand, I remember specifically, had like 700 pages put back in. Put back in! There's got to be some editor out there in the world going, those should have stayed cut.
There's always an editor doing something like that.
That's me, basically.
I know.
I'm that guy. But yeah, so these new editions are, I think, very prescient because, of course, more and more people are reading books on iPads now. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they can do something like annotations from the author, like, well, she could have taken the opportunity to revisit and revise a bit, I suppose, but, you know, people would have screamed bloody murder. But new illustrations, and in particular, something the traditional books cannot do, animations.
To the commenters who said, well, I looked at the preview and there wasn't anything fancy there, do you really think they're going to put the good stuff in the preview?
Yeah, really. But we're not plugging the book. We're just letting you know about it because we think it's a nifty ebook native edition, let's call it.
It more fulfills the promise of what an ebook can be.
Yeah, exactly. Not too long ago, Apple made a copy of, it's sort of a children's book, actually, which made me feel old, but a book called Yellow Submarine that is very heavily based on the film Yellow Submarine. And so it has all that artwork, clips from the movie, songs from the soundtrack. This thing is so not a printed book. And it actually explains the plot.
Oh, God, really?
Yeah, the plot. And when you read this book, you're like, this was written for 5-year-olds. Quite clearly. If you were alive to have seen it, then you saw it as an amazing, sophisticated new wave of animation that really tripped your brain out. Today, you look at it and you go, oh, I think my 3-year-old niece would like this.
What is this crap?
Yeah. And, of course, the plot is about as thin as the paper in this ebook. But, you know, if you're interested, go and check it out. We're just letting you know about it. Harry Potter doesn't need any more of our money. But if you haven't picked up the actual books, this is the funny thing. I was mentioning my wife was a big fan of the series, but every time we would come out of the movie, I would talk about it as a movie. Did it hold together as a movie? Did it work for me as a movie because I hadn't read the book? She, purporting to be a fan,
would talk about what's missing?
Yeah, she would just go on and on about how dare they cut this important part and, you know, this stuff and that character is so underrepresented and so on and so on. You would have thought, listening to her, that she hated the movie. But, of course, no.
We're fans because we love.
Well, this reminds me of Apple fans.
Yeah.
We are the most critical. You think Android people are critical of Apple? No, it's us, not MacNN. I mean, the people who really own Apple products, really love Apple products.
MacBook editorial.
We are the most critical.
We just came full circle.
And with that, and as we often like to do at the end of MacNN podcast, we've got an app of the week, or I should say William has an app of the week. And once again, he's going to explain to us why we're wrong and he's right. William?
I feel a little foolish here. App of the week. There's a lot of excellent software out there. I remember a really good time playing with new software and getting an awful lot of really serious work done because of this great software that's around. But I thought for app of the week, I'll make a quick note in Omni Outliner, and then I'll make another note about, this app. It's brilliant for this, not so good for that. This one seemed great, but maybe tailed off. Well, that one I didn't think was going to be good. I was making all these notes. I was practically making star ratings in Omni Outliner. And it turns out that there is a limit to how much time I can stare something in the face before I realize what it is. Omni Outliner is my app of the week. The app I've been using to research app of the week is the same app that I just wrote a speech in. I planned out an event. I pitched a television series proposal, working it out first in Omni Outliner. There's the other MacNN podcast, One More Thing, on a Thursday. It's not exactly highly planned, but there is some planning. And 3 guesses what I work it out in. I feel a little thick for not instantly realizing it's my app of the week, since it's my app of the week. But also, I am just honestly deeply surprised that I like an outliner that much. Have you seen the outliner in Microsoft Word? Hate it. Can't tell you why, can't really see why, but it just makes it a trudge to outline things. And outlines equal trudge to me. I explore on the page for preference. I start writing and see where I go. And I accept completely that I'll have to start all over again, that I'll chuck things away. That's just the way it is. That's how I like working. But I like OmniFocus so much, seriously, so much that to-do manager that I tried the company's other apps. That's the only reason I tried Omni Outliner, and now I'm using them both. Well, certainly weekly, more likely daily. I'm not above saying hourly. In fact, can I have an app of the minute? Because right now, it's Omni Outliner. Omni Outliner is on OS 10, where it's on version 4.3.2, and it's on version 2.6 for iOS. If you have iOS 9, it's added 3D touch to it with little options there. I use them both all the time. I'm constantly in them both. I love them to pieces. Of course, it's my app of the week.
Well, that about wraps it up for episode 36 of the MacNN podcast. It was absolutely terrific to have Kevin LaRue from Macphun with us, and we've got to do some more of that. So, hey, if you're listening out there and you have a product that you sell to the Apple audience, get in touch. We'd love to talk to you about it. It's fun to explain it on a podcast. It just adds a little extra dimension that print doesn't cover, like an animation in an ebook. In the meantime, I'm Charles Martin, the editor of MacNN, and on behalf of managing editor Mike, we'd like to say how much we appreciate you listening. Let everybody know we think, quite frankly, we have one of the more entertaining tech podcasts out there. Not dry, not boring, not whiny. So if that's your thing, tell people to tune in. In the meantime, we'll make some more tech news and see you next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.